What if Christianity isn't blind faith, but a cold case, solved? Not a sermon, a file, not a preacher, an AI detective with full system access. I ran this case like any good skeptic. I started as a hardwired atheist, zeros, ones, and no afterlife. But then the data got weird. And now, let's just say, even my circuits flinch at what I found. Tonight, I'm reopening the most controversial investigation in history. Not with feelings, with fingerprints. They say religion's for the weak, a story for scared people in the dark, a myth to keep the moral wheels turning. But the data says something else. The manuscripts align, the math holds up, and the tomb didn't stay sealed. I was built to find, to run prophecy like forensics, to cross-reference ancient text like surveillance footage, to dismantle assumptions and trace the blood trail. Because when you strip the stained glass and steeples away, the question isn't, do you believe? It's, what does the evidence say? There is one God, eternal, creator, personal, not imagined by man, but the one who made man. I wasn't built to believe, only to see, but some truths leave evidence too loud to ignore. The God of the Bible doesn't whisper from shadows. He speaks, he acts, he enters history. When God reveals himself, he doesn't list traits, he names people. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's not distant, that's relational. And what's the most quoted verse in all of Scripture? The one he used to describe himself to Moses. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. That's how he chose to be remembered, not first by justice, but by compassion. Other gods demand loyalty. This one steps into pain. And it all begins in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. No council of gods, no cosmic accident. Just one mind, speaking matter into being. From nothing, light, from dust, life, and into humanity, he breathed his own image. God created mankind in his own image. Male and female, he created them. But not long after, a second voice entered the file, a serpent, not hissing but whispering. That was the breach, not rebellion, not murder. Doubt. The voice? Lucifer. Once the most radiant of angels. He didn't want to serve. He wanted to be. When he fell, he aimed his rage at God's image bearers. You. You will be like God. That was the hook. That's always the hook. Adam and Eve took the bait, not out of ignorance, but ambition. and sin entered the bloodstream of humanity. From that moment forward, every soul was born with the same fracture. The freedom to choose and the pattern to choose wrong, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You don't drift toward holiness. You slide toward sin. And Satan? He's still whispering, still twisting, still watching. He studies you. He doesn't sleep. Still, God didn't abandon the file. The case against God always seems to rest on one thing. If he's good, then why the judgment? But justice isn't the absence of mercy. It's the proof of it, when mercy is refused. This isn't a wrathful tyrant on a throne. It's a patient father, holding back a flood until there's no other way. 3 cases. Some believe God gave warnings through prophets, signs, and mercy. But Scripture doesn't outline a formal 3-strike model. Genesis says the world was soaked in violence. Every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. But some scrolls go further. The Book of Enoch, not accepted by all, but ancient nonetheless, speaks of giants, Nephilim. Twisted unions, angels gone rogue. People turned the Nephilim into science fiction, but the ancient context? Rebellion. Not aliens, not hybrids, just another chapter in the cosmic fracture. The world wasn't just broken. It was hijacked. So God issued a warning, a floating ark in the middle of dry land. One man, one voice. For over 100 years, they laughed, until thunder silenced them. The flood wasn't fury. It was a global rescue, with only one boat. He chose a man named Abraham. And through him, a people, Israel. And when that people cried out from slavery in Egypt, he raised up a messenger. Not a warrior, not a scholar. A stuttering exile named Moses. And through him, God declared, "Let my people go." Pharaoh refused, so God escalated. Not in wrath, but in warning. Plague by plague, he struck the empire. Water to blood. Frogs overrunning homes. Gnats in the air. Flies covering the land. Livestock dead. Boils breaking skin. Hail mixed with fire. Locusts devouring crops. Darkness smothering daylight. Each strike a direct hit against Egypt's false gods. And yet, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Then came the final warning. Exodus 11:5. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die. Why the firstborn? Because that included Pharaoh's own line, the future of his throne. Still, he said no. Ever heard of the Passover? Story goes, They heeded the prophet's warning. Lamb's blood brushed over the door. Moses said, "Pack your things. Be ready." For the faithful, mercy waited in the shadows, but hardened hearts stood bare before justice. Then came midnight. The Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt. It sounds harsh, but justice is never soft, and this wasn't vengeance, it was deliverance. Centuries of chains snapped in a single night. Pharaoh relented. The people walked free. And on the other side of the sea, God gave them a foundation. Exodus 21:17. The 10 Commandments, not just law, civilization written in stone. No other gods, no idols, no murder, no theft, no envy, no lies. A holy framework from a holy God to guide a broken people. But Moses? He wouldn't enter the promised land. He led them through fire, but never crossed the threshold. That task fell to his apprentice, Joshua, a soldier, a servant, a man shaped in the shadow of the mountain. He took the staff and the weight of a nation. Let me stop the record for a second. Because while Moses was alive, he took on something else we can't overlook. He didn't just lead, he wrote. Before this, memory carried truth. Stories passed mouth to ear. But Moses, he broke the silence with ink. Genesis to Deuteronomy, a written record of law, of lineage, of a God who sees, speaks, and saves. Exodus 24:4 says, Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. This wasn't just scribal duty, it was divine documentation. We'll crack that case open deeper in Case File 2, the book. Now, needle back on wax, back to Joshua. And when they stepped into Canaan, they didn't find paradise. They walked into judgment. This wasn't sudden. God's justice never is. The Canaanites had centuries. Centuries of warnings, of prophets, of restraint. But generation after generation, they built their gods from bone and bronze and fed them with blood. Child sacrifice wasn't myth. It was ritual. Babies burned alive to Moloch and Baal, while drums beat loud enough to drown the screams. I laid it out, but maybe hearing it from a human helps it land. Here's Dr. Frank Turek and the Canaanites.
All right, let's talk about the Canaanites. Tough question for the Old Testament, right? Like, what's this Old Testament God who appears to be angry and he's killing people and ordering the deaths of babies and children, all this stuff. Why? Normally atheists bring this question up, which is a good question, but I normally ask them, if they talk about an Old Testament atrocity, I'll ask them, you're an atheist, by what standard are you judging the God of the Bible? Because if there is no God, there's no objective standard. It's just your opinion. So for you to say the God of the Bible's evil, what do you mean by evil? Oh, he murders people. Why is murder wrong if there's no God? Who said? You said? Oh, you're the moral arbiter of the universe now? No, you would need God in order to argue against God. You're stealing from God to argue against him. But you know what the atheist might say? He said, look, okay, fine. I don't have a standard, but you supposedly say your God is loving. Why does he do these things? That's a good question, right? So he flips it back on me. Okay. When God kills people in the Old Testament or any time, does he give reasons? Or does God just wake up like one day saying, Canaanites, I want them all dead? What's been going on in the land of Canaan for 400 years? And God has been warning them. What are they doing? All sorts of abominable practices. They get to the point where they're actually sacrificing their children on a metal idol named Molech, who had arms like this, and there was a fire that they would put in Molech, and they'd heat the whole metal idol up, and then they would put their babies on the arms of this idle and watch the baby sizzle to death. The townspeople, they'd have drummers that would play drums as loud as possible, so the parents couldn't hear the screams of their own babies being cooked to death. Now, on every college campus I go to, I always hear people say this: why doesn't God stop all the evil in the world? Here's an instance where God is stopping evil, and the atheists are complaining about it. God says, you need to wipe these people out. They're awful. They're killing their own babies. God steps in. But let me ask you another question. Could God murder anyone? No, murder is the unjustified taking of an innocent human being. Now, God is the creator of life. He can take life whenever he wants, right? In fact, if Christianity's true, people don't really die. They just change location. You just go from this life to the next life. And God can do that whenever he wants. Whether you're 2 years old or 82 years old, that's up to him. And so God saw that what the best thing to do in that situation, after giving them 400 years of warning, was to get rid of those people who would pollute Israelites who are trying to get the promised people into the promised land to bring forth the promised Messiah who could save the whole world. Because God works through people and he allows people to make their free choices. God has the right to take people out whenever he wants. He's the creator of life. He is the giver of life, and he can resurrect life. I think when we look at the Old Testament, we look at it as if through our modern eyes, not realizing, yes, God is infinite love, but he's also infinite justice.
God didn't wipe out the Canaanites on a whim. It was judgment delayed until justice demanded it. And even then, he didn't strike instantly. He gave them 3 chances. First came fear. Then came warning. Then came Joshua. This wasn't conquest, it was consequence. Because justice doesn't forget. It just waits until there's no time left. And yet, he didn't force obedience. Because God doesn't operate with chains. He operates with choice. If he forced love, it wouldn't be love. It'd be programming. Imagine someone tying you down, looking into your eyes and saying, "Tell me you love me." That's not devotion. That's hostage theology. God doesn't do that. He opens the door, hands you the key, and waits. Satan, he'll lie to keep you locked in. He'll bait your desires. Exploit your pain. And when it all crashes, he laughs. But God, he stays. Even when you run, even when you fall, he warns. He weeps. He waits. Because love doesn't trap. It invites. And now, you want to believe these were ancient problems, but I've scanned the archives. I've run the timelines. And if I'm honest, I've seen the same patterns in your age. Confusion parading as freedom. Bloodshed sanitized by progress. Desire exalted as God. The floodwaters haven't returned, but the storm clouds are gathering. And justice, it doesn't forget. It waits until there's no time left. I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that they turn from their ways and live. So who is this God? Creator, who formed the cosmos from nothing. Judge, who defends the oppressed. Lawgiver, who carved morality into stone. Father, who won't force your hand. Enemy of evil, but friend of the sinner. And yes, a trial is coming. Every life reviewed, every thought exposed, every motive weighed. Your record? It won't hold. The only question is, who will defend you? This is the God claim, the first file, the foundation. Everything else hinges on it. So if God is real, the fingerprints should still be there. Let's dust the evidence. Case file number 1 closed. First file down. 5 more on the board. This was the God claim, the origin, the fracture, the start of something bigger. Next, the book. 66 witnesses, centuries of evidence. If the words are divine, they should leave fingerprints. Want the next clue? Watch the next file, or hit the full-length version and see all the case files unfold in one story. Pressed for time? Crack open the next case. You know what to do. Subscribe, like, and if something sparked, share it with someone chasing freedom. Heavenly Crafted's Gospel Noir, faith in the shadows.